I want to thank Luis for inviting me to speak to you tonight. You know, as a point of personal privilege, it's great for me to be back here in New York, my home state. I tell people I'm from extreme western Long Island. I'm from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Is Brooklyn in the house? So I'm originally from New York, but for the last 28 years or so, I've been living in the Washington, D.C. area. And for those of you who don't know, so D.C. is a city of politics, but it's also a city of museums. There are about 70 museums in the Washington, D.C. area. But the cream of the crop has always been the 17 national museums of the Smithsonian Institution. Included among those are two of the newer ones, the National Museum of the American Indian and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, one of the top visited museums in the world. Unfortunately, what you will not see is the National American Latino Museum. And it's a shame because there really ought to be one, because for over 500 years, for over 20 generations of familias, Latinos have been contributing to this country, a country that would be unrecognizable were it not for Latino contributions. Join me for a minute. Imagine, for example, the United States of America without roughly the lower half of the country and most of the West. Well, we don't have to, because for over 500 years, Latinos have been founding and settling communities throughout most of the U.S. territory. You know, for example, we're told in elementary school that the American story began when the British get to Jamestown, Virginia in 1607 to establish the first permanent British settlement. Sadly, I think historically that's inaccurate. As far as I'm concerned, the American story begins 114 years before that, on Columbus's second voyage to the New World. In 1493, when he arrives on the shores of what is now U.S. territory in Puerto Rico. So the story of American expansion doesn't go from Virginia to the north or to the south. It goes from the Caribbean up to Florida, onto Alabama, Mississippi, onto Texas and California. Far north is Wyoming. So by the time the British get to Jamestown in 1607, it's already a bunch of Latinos saying, "Bienvenidos, what took you so long?" Imagine if General Washington had not won the War of Independence. We don't have to, because Spanish General Bernardo de Galvez, governor of Cuba, the Louisiana Territory, along with 11,000 Spanish troops, were there to help it stem the advance of the British from the south, allowing General Washington to win the Revolutionary War. Imagine if the first Admiral of the United States Navy during the Civil War had not uttered those immortal words, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead." That was David Farragut. More accurately pronounced David Farragut, whose father was a Spanish soldier who fought on behalf of the Americans in the Revolutionary War. Imagine if we didn't have the 500,000 Latino troops in World War II, making a difference in every theater of that war. Imagine the Korean War if we didn't have the exploits of the U.S. Army 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinqueneros of Puerto Rico, one of the most highly decorated combat units in the Korean conflict, setting the gold standard for the bravery of a combat unit. Imagine going to Washington, D.C. to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and not seeing the thousands and thousands of Hispanic surnames etched on that wall. Imagine if we didn't have the young Latinas and Latinos fighting and sacrificing on our behalf in the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq, or if we didn't have the 60 Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients. As an Air Force veteran, my friends, I'm going to tell you, Latinos take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty. Imagine Major League Baseball, America's pastime, without the strong cadre of Latino players on virtually every team, including the managers, including Carlos Beltran of my New York Mets. And that era of Latinos in baseball was ushered in by one of my personal heroes, Roberto Clemente, number 21. And we gotta get that number retired, don't we? Who had to deal with discrimination both because he was black and Latino. Imagine the absence of Latino workers today in our farms and in our factories, in our hotels and in our hospitals, in our restaurants and in our research laboratories, in our sanitation departments, and in our Supreme Court of the United States. in our music studios and in our movie sets? Well, we don't have to, because for over 500 years we've been relying on Latinos to fight our wars and to run our businesses, to tend our fields and to mend our wounds, to teach our kids, patrol our streets, write our laws, and to share the word of God. My friends, contrary to what some might have you believe, Latinos are not a recent patch being sewn onto the tapestry of America. We are an essential, foundational thread woven into the very fabric of America. It is for these reasons that we need a National American Latino Museum on the National Mall as part of the Smithsonian Institution. For a more complete and accurate telling of American history, to illuminate the American story for the benefit of everybody. But that's not all. We also need to educate the public about the complexity, the wonderful diversity of our community. We know the numbers. We are 60 million people. We're 18% of the population. We are $2 trillion in purchasing power. We are Afro-Latinos. We are Asian Latinos. We're blonde-haired and blue-eyed. We are mulatos and mestizos and everything in between. You know, I did Ancestry DNA recently. I found out that I'm a genetic sancocho. I'm 50% Iberian. I'm Native American. I'm African. I'm Western European. But that's us. That's who we are. We're not a race. We're a culture. We're Republicans and Democrats and independents. We're a culture made of some very fundamental shared values around family and faith and freedom and opportunity and optimism and pride and passion, and those are the qualities most in need in our country today. But we also, in closing, we also have a responsibility, a duty to inspire future generations. The Census Bureau tells us that Latinos will make up 30% of the population by the year 2060. If we hope to remain a strong, thriving, and vibrant nation, that segment of the population needs to feel acknowledged, engaged, and invested in our future. Which is why we've been in an effort to create an American Latino Museum, and we've made great progress, and you can help us get there in 3 ways. Number 1, pick up your phones, use social media to let all your friends, families, and colleagues know that you support this effort. Number 2, if you know a member of Congress or the U.S. Senate, contact them, tell them to co-sponsor the bills that we have on the floor of the House and the Senate today. And number 3, you can donate to our cause on our website or on Text to Donate. For me personally, this is a labor of love that I've been involved in for the last 12 years because of my familia. Because one day I want to be able to walk into this museum with my 2 sons and my future grandchildren. But it's also about your familias. Because I have a vision of a young Latina born today, right here on Long Island. And on her 6th grade field trip, she can go to Washington, D.C. And she can marvel at the monuments, and she can visit Capitol Hill, and she can go to the national museums, including the National American Latino Museum, and see all of these stories that I've been talking about and more. And she can leave that museum proud to be a Latina, but also proud to be an American. Gracias, familia. Thank you all so very much, and God bless you.